Kayla and Brian here from Tactical Response.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi, Brian. And we want to talk about gun control. I'm already a little hyped up because I just did the Measure 114 update video. So, forgive me if I sound a little overly impassioned. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
I think that's pretty easy for me to wrap my head around.
Especially that last part, the shall not be infringed part.
Yeah, shall not be infringed. Okay. What people fail to admit is that the first portion of that is like a preparatory statement. Like it's in a document about limiting control of a government. So an argument.
That's one of the biggest things. People use the Constitution as a way to justify things. And I'm people, this girl right here.
You are people.
But the Constitution wasn't put in place to give you those rights. If you haven't watched my dad's Where Do Rights Come From video, you should go watch it. But the Constitution in and of itself did not give us those rights. What it did was offer us protection of reprimand from our government for exercising said rights.
Mm-hmm. So, check it out. A well-balanced breakfast being necessary to the start of a healthy day. The right of the people to keep and eat food shall not be infringed. Okay, is that about like breakfast, or is it about eating?
Right. Yeah. The Constitution is a limitation on the government, not the people. And it always surprises me, how politicians try to use it against the people. Dude, that don't have nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with saying, hey guys, you don't get to talk to her about this. You're the one with the limitations, not her.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into the history of gun control. I'm sure you know, but King George actually attempted gun confiscation policies before the Revolutionary War. Clearly those didn't work. And was one of but him doing that was one of the foundational reasons for our founding fathers to write the Second Amendment in the Constitution in the first place, to put that limitation on the government because they had seen it happen firsthand. And the only reason that we were able to gain our independence was because we had our own firearms.
Mm-hmm.
And a will to fight.
So yeah, privately owned arms. That includes cannon, ordnance, battleships. If they had airplanes, that would be covered.
So I guess that brings us to the question, where does the Second Amendment stop? Because one of the common things when I would go and debate pro-2A stuff when I was in college was, so you think the average person should have access to nuclear weapons? No, you fucking idiot. No, I don't think that. I don't think the government should either, though.
Well, okay. So, unfortunately, the nuclear weapon, the cat has been let out of the bag, so to say, or Pandora's box has been opened. So you can't put the apocalypse back in the box, or the chance of it, or whatever you want to call it, the risk. So I am a Second Amendment absolutist in that, well, okay, you made them, so yeah, I think I should be able to have the same or superior arms to the government.
So when me and my dad were talking about it, because this was a conversation that came up a lot when I was doing those debates, He said that the average person should have access to, like the private citizen, should have access to every single thing the infantry has access to.
Yeah, but also cannons and tanks. And
the infantry does have access to those things, so should we. The only comfort that I take about the nuclear weapons thing is that it's not one sole person. Like, multiple things have to happen. And that's the only comfort I have with those. But I think I should have access to just about everything else. Machine guns? Fuck yeah.
Okay, look, I think that you should be able to order a machine gun from the internet. And it should be delivered to your house in the regular mail without a signature required. That's where I'm at.
So if you compare the Second Amendment to the First Amendment, social media is the equivalent of nuclear weapons.
I haven't thought of that, but that is an interesting idea.
If everyone has the right to free speech and all the other parts of the First Amendment, because it's not just that, but if you are able to say the things that you want to say, being able to go on the internet and say it to millions of people at one time, it is to the First Amendment what the atom bomb is to the Second.
That's interesting.
Hot take?
Yes.
So we can throw around our opinions all day long, but let's get into the U.S. history of gun control. Did you know that gun control laws used to be called slave laws?
I did not know that.
Yep. So all U.S. gun control, every single part of it, is rooted in racism. Lysander Spooner used the Second Amendment to argue that slavery was unconstitutional. He said, since a slave is a person who cannot possess arms, and the Second Amendment guarantees that all person can possess arms, no person in the United States, therefore, can be a slave. The right of a man to keep and bear arms is a right palpably inconsistent with the idea of his being a slave. So that it was so important to him that slavery was tied to not being able to own guns, that he actually used it to help argue against caging people and making them work for you with no money.
Yeah. Well, slavery is flawed from go, so is gun control. So you put them both together and it somehow makes it worse.
Can you guess what the first gun control organization in the U.S. was? Especially if you're peeking at my paper.
Ooh, I know.
Tell them.
Oh, the Ku Klux Klan.
After, slaves were freed, specifically in the South, where the KKK had a big hold, any area that they held any kind of power, they would go and physically disarm Black Americans so that they could impose their will on them. John Salter, a professor at Taugula, I can't pronounce that one. He was a chief organizer of the NAACP's Jackson movement during the early 60s.
Tagula.
Yeah. He said, no one knows what kind of massive racist retaliation would have been directed against grassroots Black people. Sorry, I got to repeat that. No one knows what kind of massive racist retaliation would have been directed against grassroots Black people had the Black community not had a healthy measure of firearms within it.
Yeah. So the most vulnerable people have the most need to be able to protect themselves from other people.
And that, like, as far as U.S. gun control history goes, it all started to try to keep guns out of the hands of African Americans and women. And women. Women couldn't own shit. And like, if you look at minorities, women and minorities are the most affected by these regulations. Because if you've got enough money, you can buy whatever you want. Bringing me to another point. The word or the term organized crime did not exist before Prohibition. And you might be asking yourself, why is she comparing gun control to Prohibition? It's because the sale and production of alcohol had always been legal before that. And then the government arbitrarily stepped in and made it illegal. And it made way for organized crime to take place. The black market, speakeasies, all these ways to get around it. So it turned otherwise law-abiding citizens into criminals just for having alcohol. And every gun control measure out there is doing the same thing to law-abiding citizens with guns.
Well, so on Prohibition, I'm from Kentucky and you're from Tennessee. So in addition to turning all of those good people into criminals, it also turned some of our kin into millionaires.
No, but that is how all of these gangs become so prominent and lucrative. Like, if you want to make money off of something, make it illegal. It opens up a whole new world.
Yeah. So everybody still drank.
Yeah.
Including the people that signed the laws and enforced them.
And the 14th Amendment has very strong ties to the Second Amendment. Because, like I said, getting slavery overturned, them using the Second Amendment as a reason to not have slaves, it protected and protected African Americans' ability to exercise those rights when it was written into the 14th Amendment. Because, like I said, the Constitution is not what gives you your rights. It is just a legal document offering protection from the government. So it limits the government, not the individual, the government, from any kind of reprimand against you. And the 14th Amendment provided African Americans that same protection in that document.
Yes. I'm like, it's funny because it's like when I listen to Dr. Jordan Peterson.
I love him.
Like, I have one of his books and I haven't read it because I started reading it and I listened to him. Like, I just agree with everything you said. So, like, nothing follows.
Like, one of the things that, and it's a little side note, I write an outline for all of this stuff so that we can make sure that we cover everything, stay on track, and don't get completely crazy. But this is a side note worth, like a sidetrack worth taking. One of the things that bothers me is when people will unfriend, or like on social media or even in real life, stop being friends with somebody because of a difference in politics. Like, I understand that your core beliefs need to match for you to have somebody in your life. But let's be real. When you are on Facebook or Instagram, those aren't those aren't people that you have to get along with to have in your life. You can be friendly and kind and still disagree with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm sure you and I don't agree on everything.
You got that right.
But if you surround yourself with an echo chamber, then I don't think that you will ever get a deep enough understanding of your own belief system to be able to argue against it. Like in high school, one of the things that we had to do on the debate team was argue both sides of an argument. And when you surround yourself with an echo chamber, and it is that constant, like, well, yep, I agree with everything you said, it doesn't allow for any growth.
Right.
And one of the things that I tell people specifically regarding the Second Amendment, like, I'm not friends with them, they don't like guns. If one day it does come down to a civil war, I want it to be just as hard for the other side to fire into my side of the crowd that it is for me to fire into their side of the crowd. Like, I want there to be friendly faces to make it more difficult, because like everybody jokes about the boogaloo and all this stuff, but it will forever change the quality of life that you and your children have. So if we can do it with voting and peaceful protesting and things like that to secure our freedoms, I'd much rather do it that way. But if it ever gets to that point, I want it to be a difficult decision.
Yeah. On that note, I know people like to share memes and stuff like that and have fun on social media and stuff like that. But I think people just speak about it so
nonchalant,
so casually, in that perhaps you don't have a full understanding of how this thing will resolve. So, imagine, for example, the Reconstruction after the Civil War and how awful that whole thing was, right? It, the Civil War itself was awful.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so we got rid of slavery out of it. Was it worth it? Yeah, but the the infrastructure, the innocent lives lost, all of that stuff, the people just shoved into absolute poverty, continued violence. Like, if you haven't been there and done that, or if you haven't traveled abroad, or to the poorest parts of the country or the world, you're in for, if you haven't done without, if you haven't lived any kind of adversity, you will be in for quite a shock if you have to find yourself living that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, just like you said, if we can talk through it, if we can vote through it, let's do that.
Yeah. And like the only reason that people were able to fight back was because they owned their own firearms. Like, that is the only thing standing between you and someone imposing their will on you. Like, anytime that there's a war, if you are going to be a part of it, you have to have access to weapons. And in today's society, where weapons include firearms, it is the only thing standing between you and someone else imposing their will on you.
Mm-hmm. See, that's...
Specifically as a woman. Like, I couldn't go hand to hand with you. I weigh more than you. I am about the same height as you.
Okay, look, if
but
you got...
no, but literally, I'm gonna go ahead, like, I am a badass.
No,
we'll just throw that out there.
For those of you guys that haven't spent time with Kayla, like, in person, she is a savage. And I mean that as a compliment.
But there are, like, pound for pound, you are stronger than me. And that's something that I've always, especially as a woman, Like, I don't want to lose the thing that gives me my independence and empowerment. Like, that is what keeps other people from making me do the things that they want me to do.
Mm-hmm.
It is what gives me the choice. And I think to take that away would be criminal and very, very sexist.
Evil.
Yeah,
even.
evil.
Well, I mean, I think that sums up the whole debate right there. Like, close this book. Let's go home. We'll have some coffee. No. Yeah. So I don't understand why that people like private citizens who support the violation of these human and civil rights that the Second Amendment aims to help protect. I don't know why they want villains and criminals, dirtbags, and the government to have a monopoly on the use of force. Because that's what you're asking for. So,
like, the same political side of the spectrum that calls for gun control is the same political side of the spectrum that calls for defunding the police. So either you trust the police with your safety or you don't. You can't have both. Like, for me, like, I don't trust anybody more than me with my safety. But they want to say, no, I don't trust you with your safety. We should leave it to the police. But I don't trust the police either.
And
so what?
Yeah, matter of fact, I'm going to call them and then spew hate and throw things at them when they get here and say, why on earth, why did you come here, even though I called you? You should have saved me better. Or something. I don't know. Yeah, they don't like cops either.
So that leads us into projection. Do you want to talk about it?
Why don't you start us off?
So projection, and this was something else that, like, me and my dad talked about this stuff a lot. It is one of our core beliefs that every human was born with the right to be able to protect themselves with the best tools available to do so. And one of the things that came up a lot was projection. And that is when somebody feels something and pretends and convinces themselves that you would have to feel the same way too. So, for instance, like, if there is the easiest way to explain it is spouses. If one of them's cheating, they are usually the one that accuses the other person. They get insanely jealous and like, let me go through your phone, like, while they're the one secretly gotten somebody in their DMs. But it works the same way for gun control as well. Like, just because you don't trust yourself with a gun doesn't mean I don't trust myself with one.
Yeah. So the projection thing, it's one, it shows incredible immaturity. I would go so far as to say narcissism almost, or something. I can't think of the synonym, but something in that vein, right? And like, just control yourself. Like, would you really, just because you're angry at somebody because they messed up your fast food order, would you really murder a human being over that? Like, so immaturity, posturing, and being so self-absorbed that you can't possibly understand another entity's thoughts and ability to control themselves.
Now, this is also the point where I call gun owners out. Owning a gun, carrying a gun, comes with a huge responsibility. Everyone is looking at you whenever these things happen. Like whenever there is an argument in the drive-thru or a road rage incident. Like, we have to be responsible people, live good, moral, and honorable lives so that they lose all ammo against us.
Yeah, you should do that anyway.
yeah. But it's extra important if you have a gun.
Yeah, so James Yeager had said his gun keeps society safer.
What he meant by that was when he had a gun on, like, he was way less likely to let his ego get involved because he understood the implications that came with it. Like, if it was him and another dude and they were in a verbal altercation and he didn't have a gun on, it could just stay at a verbal altercation, maybe even bloom into a fist fight. If he did, then there was a gun present and he had to show more restraint with that, not like, no, because of that knowledge. Like, he knows that it can't get past, like, turning around, walking away.
Yes. So I would like to add on that a little bit. So the point there isn't that one would become so overwhelmed that they would resort to their most forceful measure. The point is, if you carry a gun, there will be a gun in that altercation. So, and no matter how bad, you don't want someone else to get that gun. A fist fight, as soon as they find that thing, can turn into a lethal force encounter, whether you want it to or not. Well, you don't want it to, but whether you had planned on it or not.
So what switching gears again, do you remember when the United States government started sending guns over to the citizens of other countries? And it's happened in more than just the Middle East. Like, we recently did it somewhere else.
Yeah.
For its citizens to stand up to a tyrannical government.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, as soon as we had like 3 extra guns, we were sending them to wherever that it might benefit the United States.
So, like, they think it's important enough to arm, as I say they as in the U.S. government. The U.S. government thinks that it is important enough to arm citizens of other countries for the sole purpose of fighting a tyrannical government, while at the exact same time trying to take guns away from its citizens because less than 20,000 people got killed in 2019 with firearms, were murdered in 2019 with firearms.
Out of how many million?
Right. Speaking of numbers.
Well, so
go ahead.
In this day and age, it's not because the United States government wants to support people fighting a tyrannical regime. It's because it is in the interest of the United States of America.
But the fact that they're doing it.
Oh, yeah. No, it's like, hilarious.
And so, real quick, let's go over some numbers. Democide. Okay, democide, as defined by Rudolf Rummel, who coined the term, is the intentional killing of an unarmed or disarmed person by government agents acting in their authoritative capacity and pursuant policy or high command. Rummel also said it was the leading cause of non-natural death in the 20th century, sitting at around 242 million people since 1900.
Mm-hmm.
242 million people killed by governments. And our government wants to push for gun control because we have people here that die by homicide. In 2019, 13,927 people were 13,927 homicides with firearms happened in 2019. That also includes justifiable homicides.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was really difficult to find a lot of these statistics in general, but I couldn't find this next one coming up, so I had to do the math by myself. The Journal of Criminal Law says that between 800,000 and 2.5 million uses of a firearm in self-defense every year. And of those 80,000 to 200,000 are women defending themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the numbers that I found on that were as low as 65,000. Like for liberal news outlets and stuff like that, they said guns are only used in self-defense 65,000 times a year. So there were 13,927 homicides. And even if we take the lowest number, 65,000, using a gun in self-defense, that means that you are 4.6 times more likely to need your gun than you are to have a gun used against you. And if we go with the higher numbers from around 2 million, you are 142.8 times more likely to need your gun than you are to have one used against you. 142.8 times more likely to use your gun in self-defense than you are to be murdered with one. And those numbers don't exist on the internet. I had to math myself on that.
Well, sounds about right.
And I'm like, how is that not enough? You want to say that you want to take that right away from me because of the almost 14,000 number. But we don't talk about how many times a gun has saved somebody. And that's just the stuff that's reported. I've had to use my gun in self-defense before. I didn't have to shoot somebody. Having the gun was enough to keep them from committing a violent crime against me. And I'll talk about what happened. I was going to a convenience store. It was later in the evening, and it was right down walking distance from my house. I drove anyways because I'm kind of lazy sometimes. And it was at night, and I'm like, but I go to the convenience store. I'm standing in line, and these two guys behind me start making sexually explicit comments about me. I was like, I just ignore it. Don't engage. Thought that was going to be enough. I was in the process of checking out, and one of them grabbed my shoulder and kind of nudged me around and was like, hey, you single? No, I'm married. And he was like, oh, give me your number. And I said, no, thanks. I'm married. And he said, I didn't ask if you were married. I said, give me your number, bitch. So I left my snacks and drinks and all that stuff on the counter. I left all of the money. And at this time, I was broke as shit. So leaving $20 was a lot to me. But I left it on the counter. I walked outside. Him and his friends started to follow me outside and kept getting physically closer, very aggressive. And when they started following me, I ran. They began moving faster behind me to keep up. So I finally just was like, nope, not today. Pulled my gun out and I just yelled, stop. And guess what? They stopped. I put my gun in my purse, got in my car, and I drove home. Like, I didn't report it because I was only 19 at the time. I wasn't supposed to have a gun, but I did anyways. Like, legally. And I believe with all of my heart that my gun saved my life that day. At least saved me from being sexually assaulted.
It did.
Like, at minimum, it saved me from being sexually assaulted. And for that very reason, I don't know if you can ever change my mind about guns. Because I'm not the only person I know who is here and intact in that way. Like, haven't been sexually assaulted like that because of a gun. Like, I know a bunch of people who are here because they had a gun. And I don't want to ever feel helpless or stuck in a situation. Like, I cannot imagine a more negative emotion than feeling helpless.
Yeah. So why? Why would anyone want to force helplessness onto good people? What good person would want to force helplessness onto good people?
And that's what gun control restrictions do. And it was a question that I asked in the Measure 114 video. Like, what's different about gun control than the laws against murder? Like, what makes a criminal, somebody who's going out to commit these violent acts that we're supposedly trying to protect against with gun control, if they're not going to not break this law, why are they not going to break this one? And if you can't justify a reason to make them more applicable or more followable, then it's intentional that the only person you're punishing are law-abiding citizens.
Yeah.
Like, that's what it feels like to me, at least. Like, I would like to hear what somebody else had to say about it. Not yet. You're like, yeah, I did say that. I said, yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
I don't get it. I'm trying to make sure that I went over. Oh, this one. We haven't talked about this. Down low gun control. If they can't get it to pass in court, they can control you through your pocketbooks. So in 1934, when the first federal gun regulation was passed, it was tax stamps. And where do we say gun control was rooted in? Like, what was gun control rooted in? Racism. So they made tax stamps to make it unaffordable to people they didn't want having guns. Specifically black people. Black people and poor people. Like, and I said, and I'm not Joe Biden over here.
Wow.
Sorry. But like, and it's still going on today.
Yeah, $200 was a lot of money in 1934.
Yeah, $200 was $200 is a lot of money today.
That's true.
$200 was the equivalent of way more than $200 in 1934.
Yeah, with the Depression and all that.
Mm-hmm. And then, like, all of these other, like, bans. If you look at a legal machine gun, like one that doesn't require a tax stamp, I don't know if anybody in this room, at least, could afford to buy one. I've never seen one go for less than $10,000.
Oh yeah, you gotta get a stamp and all that.
The ones that don't require a stamp, pre-1980.
Oh, they still do.
I'm sorry, transferable ones.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ones that are transferable.
Yes. I'm not sure what your question is.
Or like what? The fact that they're so expensive. Like I couldn't afford to have that machine gun.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like I haven't seen one. That's what I was saying. Like I have not seen the pre-1980 whatever machine guns go for less than 10 grand.
Oh yeah, that's for like a like entry level. Like the 10 grand one. That's like a beat to shit Uzi or something.
Yeah.
Or like a Sten gun or whatever. Some really cheap.
Yeah.
Junky machine gun.
And like the fact that you have to go through a whole process with the FFL stuff to do the manufacturing and stuff, and then they're all non-transferable now. Like anything after the 1980s, they're not transferable. So I guess they do still require the tax stamp, but they just can transfer. I guess that's where the confusion come from earlier. This like I said, I was flustered coming in here because I was already upset having to make the other video. Like the Second Amendment is one of the most important issues to me in my life. Like I value my freedoms as much as I value having children. And I love my kids a lot. And
you want them to have to be free.
And anytime that I feel like that's getting messed with, it puts me in a tiny bit of like a head spin to where I have to think longer about my words, and then I can't use the right ones. Like it bothers me enough to where it's like, okay, now get your thoughts together, get it put down on paper, because it makes me angry.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised that neither one of us have like got straight fired up. Well, you just finished recording a video
where I was where you were
a little fired up.
Yeah. Well, but we haven't had any disagreement.
Well, that's true. I'm using my radio voice too, you know.
Yeah. But no,
helps me calm down.
It hurts my head when I can't understand like how other people feel any different when they are presented with facts. And it was something that my dad always like laughed at me for, because I would get frustrated and he was just like, you're not going to win an emotional battle with logic. And that's all facts are, is logic.
Yeah. Like I said, immature, unintelligent. Well,
but my emotional side of it is, so you want to make me feel helpless?
Yeah, like fuck you. Why would you do that to me?
So that's how I'm going to win it. Like you, especially in today's like woke age, you want to make a female feel helpless?
Yeah, or you want to make a human feel helpless.
No, they don't care about you. You're a white dude.
Well, I know, but I work really hard.
You have anything else you want to add?
About what?
Gun control in general.
Oh, gun control in general. Yeah, so I'll say, I have a good deal of respect for peace officers, a necessary part of our society, or mostly necessary until we can get it together. And I have taken classes from people in law enforcement, and taken classes with people, peace officers, like they were, like I'm like standing on the firing line with me, like we're taking a class together. I have taught a lot of people in law enforcement, like they gave me coins and patches and stuff like that. So those are all good people, and so I have the utmost respect for them. But when you are violating someone's human and civil rights, you are not the good guy in that situation. Mm-hmm. So why would you work towards inducing helplessness through violence on somebody? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
No, and I think that what separates you and I from a lot of other people is like we don't look at a gun as something that has its own sway, like left or right. It could be good or it could be bad. And we recognize that it can be used for good or used for bad. So we look at a gun as a tool. And for me, and I know for you too, like guns are life-saving devices. So when someone tries to, like, if that's, like, let's use that word in place of gun, like, I carry a life-saving device every single day. Well, how does it save your life? It keeps people from imposing their will on me. I think that we can all agree that it's not okay to impose your will on someone else, especially if that is going to harm the person or something like that. Why would you want to take that? Like, if you had an insulin pump and I was going to take that from you, it was a life-saving device, I would be looked at as a bad person. I would be looked at as the one in the wrong. Even though I could take that insulin pump and go put it on somebody that's not a diabetic and kill them with it. So I can use that insulin pump for bad. But it's a life-saving device. And again, going back to those numbers, between, like, let's just go with the middle ground. 1 million times every single year, that gun is used as a life-saving device. And a little under 14,000, it takes it away. But the overwhelming majority still says it's a life-saving device.
Yeah. So a life-saving device for stopping bad guys from killing people. So I'm sure you'll agree that you can improvise life-saving equipment. For example, it is difficult, or can be difficult, to improvise a tourniquet and chest seals and airways. Those things can be improvised, but a purpose-built piece of life-saving equipment carried on your person is strictly the best.
Oh yeah, for sure, hands down.
Option, and it's the one that has the greatest likelihood of success. So I think it's ridiculous to imagine that when someone is confronted with force they cannot contend with or escape from, that you assume one might be able to improvise something to compete with that.
And since we brought it up a couple of times, I'll bring it up in the podcast too. You guys have probably already seen the video. I'm pulling it up in my notes right now, my Google Docs. So the comment, it's a direct quote from the district judge, Karen J. Emergut, said, "The burden imposed by Measure 114 on the core Second Amendment right of self-defense is minimal." And the word that pisses me off there is minimal, because that means that there is a burden to the Second Amendment and they are okay with it.
Oh, an infringement. You might. Oh, no.
Right? And that is how you go from having machine guns that can be delivered by mail to mass graves, by allowing them to make minimal infringements incrementally. And the fact that you have a sitting federal judge that openly admitted that they are okay with a violation of the Constitution because it is minimal, they should immediately lose their position as a federal judge, because you take an oath and you're supposed to uphold the Constitution. And she readily admitted that she is okay with violating that because it's only a small violation.
Mm-hmm. She don't care.
And like, if somebody only rapes you a little, they minimally penetrate you, does that still count as rape?
Oh no, that's a minor inconvenience.
Like, because to me, that would still feel like rape. Even if there was only a minimal amount of penetration against my will, still counts as rape to me.
Yeah, so Spotify audience, that was sarcasm on my part, in case you couldn't figure it out, because I often have a pretty slate-faced delivery.
But like, people are being open with it. And it's so, like, how are people more not up in arms over it? Like, how are you not being louder and being pissed off and peacefully protesting and doing all these things when they admitted they know that it is an infringement? They're just okay with it. Like, that pisses me off.
Yeah.
It makes me angry to my core that that judge is still a sitting judge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how have we gotten to the point to where we think that that is okay? Because again, the Constitution is not what grants you your rights. So what they are asking for is, or what they are demanding, not asking for, what they are demanding is that they be allowed to reprimand you for exercising something that you were born being allowed to do.
Oh, yeah. Not reprimand. They're talking about kidnapping at gunpoint and holding you against your will for the rest of your life.
Yep.
That's what that is.
And that's what, like, anytime that somebody is arrested for an unconstitutional law, that's what happened to them. They were kidnapped at gunpoint and being held against their will by the state.
Yeah.
How is it any different?
That is immoral, and I would find myself under no obligation to participate in that.
Like, when you frame this in that context, that as long as it only does it a little bit, it's okay. That makes a lot of stuff okay. Like, I can stab you as long as I only minimally do so.
Yeah, not a lot, baby girl. Just a little bit.
I just, again, that word just pisses me off because it readily admits that they know that there's an infringement there and that they're just okay with it.
Okay. So here's something that I kind of wanted to touch on. On the racist origins of gun control and racism and gun control and stuff like that. So I don't know that this is strictly racist, but it's within that same the same talking parameters on that same heading, I guess you could say. And that I don't think that like felons should be a thing. I don't believe in a second class of citizens. So I would say that either someone is able to participate in society or they are not. And so if they are not, that means that they have, they might have to experience one of their occupational hazards and just not participate anymore. But to say that someone, a human, a citizen, can't vote or it must be made helpless against any form of force that anyone decides that they want to impose on them. I'm not okay with that.
Another hot take. I don't think that there should be any laws that limit what you can do as a person unless there is direct cause from your action hurting someone else, like physically hurting someone else. So, like, my rights end where yours begin. The only thing that should be legal is the force between it. And that covers all the violent crimes.
Yep.
So, like, murder, well, yeah, it should be illegal because it's you hurting me or vice versa. Rape, kidnapping, stuff that imposing your will on somebody else is pretty much the only thing that I should be illegal.
Yes.
That's it. And that if you do that, you are no longer welcome to participate in society at all.
Yeah, that's true. I do think that we could...
Adults. Like, kids, it's not me imposing my will on them. It's me, like... Teaching them.
Yeah. Well, I think that we as a society can agree about, like, traffic lights and stuff, but that's really...
So but even as far as like traffic light, because every single law on the books, the caveat or the part that they don't read out loud means enforceable at gunpoint and by imprisonment. You can go to jail for speeding. It's just also a ticketable offense.
Well, and if you choose not to go to jail, then you are getting that at a gunpoint.
Right. So, like, all the stuff that people are putting out there, like, the traffic lights, if you hurt somebody, you should go to jail. You imposed your will on somebody else.
Yeah, good point. I was really just joking, but that's okay.
No, but I believe it to my core. Like, yeah, sure, leave the red lights up. If I didn't hurt anybody running it, you have no business pulling me over. It exists because I know that reduces accidents. And I know that people are going to say, well, that would never work. People would just be out there doing all kinds of stuff. Like,
well, one, they do that anyway.
Right. And two, like, if the systems work, like, I stop at red lights so I don't get hit either. So I would still, like, stop and do what I was supposed to do. Maybe that's a little bit projection. Maybe I think that other people are too good, though.
Well, that's another podcast.
But no, it bothers me when there is a law that prohibits something that does not harm anyone.
Yeah,
because at that point, if it's not harming somebody, it's not a criminal matter, it's a civil matter. And that's its own little thing.
Yeah, and it's none of the government's business.
Yeah. And government distrust is at an all-time high. The fact that measures like this, when I say measures, it's because I've been going over 114, but the fact that gun control is still even coming up when over half the country doesn't trust the government is insane to me. Brian, I don't trust you to have my best interest at heart, but here, let me say that your security is in my hands today, or my security is in your hands today.
That hurts my feelings, Kayla.
It was an example.
I know.
I do trust Brian. But
and I will always pull security for you, Kayla.
But
even though you're perfectly capable of doing it yourself.
An armed society is a polite society.
Facts.
And that people have been tricked into believing that others are only moral because of government laws or religion.
Yeah, okay. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. One, through experience and study and the share of wisdom, turns out my moral code, without assigning it to a literary work,
mm-hmm.
Or a document or a religious text or anything like that, is really, really similar to a lot of religious texts. And it has nothing to do with the chance of prosecution or persecution or punishment or anything like that. It's because I believe that living an honorable life is the right thing to do. And so I do it.
So I make a joke all the time that I live in like a moral gray area.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that under the right circumstances, almost anything is acceptable. I say almost because there's never an acceptable time to hurt children and things like that. Like there are some things that are just absolutely unacceptable. But if you look at things like murder, there are acceptable times to murder people.
So,
and by murder, I mean kill.
Right.
And I know that there's the murder brings a context of intent, but there are appropriate times to kill people. There are appropriate times to steal from people. There are appropriate times to do almost everything. So my moral code, like pretty much live and let live. But I'm not going to do something harmful to somebody else because it makes me feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, without just cause, there's no way I could ever hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm. So, homework, Kayla. I want you to tell Joey that I said you are chaotic good and ask him what that means.
That I'm chaotic good?
Yes.
Is that the D&D thing?
Yes.
Okay. I know a little bit about it.
I know. You're strictly, it's orange.
So what are you?
Orange personality.
Are you neutral?
I like to think I am neutral good, trending, lawful neutral.
I'll have to like really dig into that because I've only ever seen funny memes and stuff about it. I haven't done a deep dive into what it actually means. Real quick, was that supposed to be a compliment? Or just an observation?
Both.
Because like I got told that I reminded somebody of Beth from Yellowstone. And my dad was just like, that's not a compliment.
Oh, I don't watch.
So I was like, oh. Okay.
I don't watch TV, so I don't know.
Don't get up on that moral high ground. Like,
okay, Kayla, was a fucking compliment.
My name is Kayla, and I love trash TV. So not only do I watch TV, I watch trash TV, like Love Island. I don't even know if that's
whatever you want to do in your free time, even though I may consider it morally reprehensible, I believe it's your right to do it, and I think you should be happy in pursuing it.
Yeah.
I will never know what you're talking about, so that's okay. We'll have to talk about something else.
Do we have anything else that we want to add?
No.
So the high points of the podcast were all U.S. gun control is rooted in racism. Literally used to be called slave laws. The root word of gun control is control.
Mm-hmm.
Democide is the non-natural leading cause of death in the 20th century. And democide is where the government kills an unarmed populace. And that you were born with your rights. They were not given to you by the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. Constitution is just a legal document that prevents the government from interfering or reprimanding you for exercising said rights. If you want to carry a gun, I think you should. If you don't. Like I said in my morally gray best, live and let live.
Yeah, so I'll say, live a good, honorable life, and leave me and my people the fuck alone.
Morality does not come from the government, laws, or religion. It can be independent of all of those.
Especially
the government.
The government.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
I wanted to wave, but it's a podcast, so that I'm going to wave anyway. Podcast listeners, just know that I wave goodbye at you.